now we're going to talk about wilty plants. Would you agree that a plant, if it's all full of water and has turgor pressure, all the leaves and it's all perky? And if you don't give the plant water, it'll get kind of... If you don't give them enough water, they just die. Yeah, I've killed several plants that way. Since that's true, plants don't want to lose water, right? I mean, they have to lose some water. That's how they carry nutrients from the roots up to the leaves to use them whenever they're making sugars, doing photosynthesis. Great. But they don't want to run out of water. Now, this is a cross-section of a leaf. It's got air spaces inside. Those are like the air spaces in your lungs. You know, we take air into our lungs, and then we do gas exchange. We exchange the carbon dioxide we want to get rid of for the nice oxygen that we want to take in, right? Well, plants do things the opposite. So they have these spaces, and they take in air, and they exchange the oxygen they don't need for carbon dioxide, which they want to use in the what, Alethea?
In the thyroid, how you say it?
Nope.
Not that, I'm sorry.
Look for a C word.
Calvin cycle?
Yes, in the Calvin cycle. They use the carbon dioxide in the Calvin cycle. Okay, so it's opposite of us. It's still taking air in, but they're going to take the air and swap gases, getting rid of the oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. You're fine with that, right?
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. They have these holes in the leaf to do it. They're called stomata. They have these cells around them called guard cells. And the guard cells, they're kind of, when they're full of water, this side is very stiff and this side is very flexible, so they go right in there. And whenever they run out of water, they just kind of sag over. So when the plant's running out of water, the guard cells, and they cover, there's open, there's closed, they cover the stomata. If the plant's running out of water, the plant plugs this down so it doesn't lose water. When plants are running out of water, they close their stomata so they can't lose water out of it. There's a problem with that though. Inside this airspace, they're still trying to take gases out and put gases in. They're still taking carbon dioxide out. They're still putting oxygen in, right? And normally they get rid of that, breathe it out. But the plants, if they're running out of carbon dioxide in that airspace, it's going to shut down their photosynthesis. Kind of a problem, right?
Okay.
So tell me why carbon monoxide kills you. What?
The chemicals in it?
Well, no, not that.
I don't know, but I heard people die.
Oh, people die from it for sure. Megan, you're one of the clever people in here, you know? All right. You're about to, because this is really, really simple. All right.
Is it the combustion?
No. This is actually much weirder. Let's stop talking about plants. Let's focus on us. The reason we die if we breathe too much carbon monoxide is because we have this protein called hemoglobin. It's what red blood cells are packed full of. That's why they're red. They have the heme groups in them, the irons. And they are really good at carrying oxygen. Unfortunately for us, they're easily distracted, and they are even better at holding on to some other chemicals, like carbon monoxide. So what happens is if you have too much carbon monoxide around, the hemoglobin is supposed to be carrying oxygen, it goes up to the lungs instead. It's like, oh, what? That's cool. It's shiny. It's different. I don't see this molecule around. That's cool. You're like, come on, carry oxygen. It's like, no. I'm going to carry this for a while. I like this better. It's so much cool. If you want to use science words for it, hemoglobin has a higher affinity for carbon monoxide than it does for oxygen.
It likes it better.
Yes, it likes it better than what it's supposed to like. And this is a problem, okay? Because if you expose yourself to carbon monoxide, all the hemoglobin starts carrying carbon monoxide instead of oxygen, and then your cells aren't getting any oxygen and they're dying. And that's not good. Would we agree? Well, plants have a similar problem. Remember our old friend Rubisco that captures carbon dioxide and brings it into the plant to do the carbon fixation to make the sugar? Right? Okay. Rubisco is easily distracted by oxygen. Its job is picking up carbon dioxide and making sugars. But if you have too much oxygen present, it's not going to do that. So let's back up a slide. If the plant closes off its nostrils, closes off the stomata, and then we're using up the carbon dioxide inside the leaf, and the levels are dropping, and we're putting oxygen into it, and it's rising, it's not just a problem of the plant running out of carbon dioxide. It's a problem that the rubisco that's supposed to be making photosynthesis possible is loading up on oxygen instead of doing what it's supposed to. And believe it or not, it's even worse. Because what happens when it picks up the oxygen, the only way to get the rubisco back to normal so it can do its job is that the plant has to waste the ATP it made in the light reaction, physically ripping the molecule apart, rebuilding it partially so it can run again. That's very bad for the plant. It wastes all that. It goes through, it captures sunlight, it does the light reactions, it makes ATP through what molecule? What molecule makes the ATP, Alethea? Remember, the spinning molecule, the ATP synthase, right? So the problem is the ATP we make in the light reactions, if we let the plant get too much oxygen, it wastes it there instead of making sugar. We call this process photorespiration. It makes that's in red, that means what?
It's going to be on set.
Yes. All right, that makes the plant have trouble growing in hot and dry conditions because it needs water. Now we'll get to your question. So what are plants going to do? Well, just like in my best Jeff Goldblum voice from Jurassic Park, nature will find a way. So there are other ways to do photosynthesis. We've been talking about one that depends on how many carbons in a G3P? Three, exactly. So we've been talking about a 3-carbon method to doing photosynthesis. There are some others. And they both are 4 carbons, but because there are 2 different ones, we named the first one, we called it the 4-carbon method, C4. And then we discovered another one, well, it also is 4-carbon. We can't call it 4-carbon. So they call it the CAM, the Crecilian acid metabolism. They named it after the 4-carbon acid. This one, there's a 4-carbon organic acid, they just called it C4, and then they discovered another 4-carbon acid there. Oh, that one. But here's the way it works. In these plants, they have an airspace that takes in air, and then it shuts, and then you have this happening where the CO2 is going down as you're using it, the O2 is going up, and that should mess up their rubisco, but it doesn't because the air is up here, and the plant, this organic acid, this is the C4, they take the carbon dioxide out without using rubisco, hook it into a 4-carbon acid, move it through the plant to other cells that are not next to the air spaces, break it back down to carbon dioxide, and then run it through the Calvin cycle. No, there's no oxygen near the rubisco to screw it up. Does that make sense? All right, so yes, it's horribly inefficient to turn carbon dioxide into a 4-carbon acid, to break it down into carbon dioxide, to transport it, to turn it into carbon dioxide, to run it through the Calvin cycle to make the sugar. But it's better than drying out and dying, right? Okay, so this works. You physically separate get the carbon dioxide from the air part of this process from the Calvin cycle. Good? That's how C4 does it. Crecilian acid metabolism, this is, by the way, this is what pineapples do. They do it differently. What they do is they open up the stomata and breathe at night. Well, because it's not as hot, they're not going to lose as much water. Okay, so they breathe at night. They take in all the carbon dioxide that they're going to need for the entire 24-hour period, load it up as Crecilian acid, and then as the sun comes up, they close off their stomata and they don't open them all day because they're not going to lose any water that way. Good? Good? And during the day, what do? They break that acid they made during the night back down into carbon dioxide, and they go ahead and run through the process. Good? So what I want you to know from this is that there's more than one way to do photosynthesis. I want you to know that that Rubisco gets screwed up by oxygen, and I want you to know that both of these methods, C4 and CAM, exist to keep the oxygen away from the Rubisco. Good? All right. Now we're finally going to talk about what the book harps about for a long time. Ooh, algae for fuel. It's actually a pretty good idea. Yay, photosynthesis happens. That's kind of what this slide is about. And different plants make different things. If you remember, I'm going to jump ahead a few slides and then come back. If you remember, when we make a cell, we make the cell wall out of cellulose. Every cell has proteins, every cell has carbohydrates, every cell has oils. Great. Well, all of those are made during photosynthesis. This oil is made by the algae. You can spin that oil out and use it for biodiesel. You can use almost every part of it. You can take the sugars and break those down to make ethanol. You're like, oh, 10% ethanol in your gasoline? That's where you can get it. So there are different methods of doing biofuels. They are kind of important because we already use a lot of oil. Well, no, that's, you're laughing. We use a lot of oil, and this graph is where we use it in the U.S., you know, and where people use oil. But the thing they're not talking about, the economy is really booming here, okay? China, everybody wants the U.S. lifestyle. They're starting to get money, and they're all going to be buying cars. Right now, they use a lot less energy than they will in 5 years, in 10 years, because everybody who can afford a car for the first time, they're buying them. There are more and more cars on the road. Yeah, the U.S. uses a lot of energy. By the way, this is already out of date. I think we're now second to China, but I'm not positive. We can look that up. Anyway, but they're close second behind us now, if they're not equal at least. Anyway, if you look at this chart, this is an important chart because everybody's like, oh, well, we'll just get off of oil and we'll do more solar and more wind, and I'm all for doing those things. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the energy we need. We've got less than 10% of the energy we're getting from renewables. I'm sure we can expand that a little, but if you're realistic, you're not going to be able to make that enough to replace oil anytime soon. If you've noticed, you hear people say the U.S. is now producing more energy than it uses for the first time in decades. It's because of natural gas, and specifically because of natural gas fracking, the method of fracturing the rocks and collecting the gas. The one that's so controversial because people are wondering what gets into the drinking water. Or let's say the people in Ohio who are upset because they now have more earthquakes than they used to. Just small tremors, you know, not serious ones.
I'm pro-fracking, so.
I don't.
She's pro having her car drive.
No. She said she's pro-fracking, and I'm going to give you a slightly more nuanced position. I think fracking would be a lot better if they were more specific about what they were doing. There's a proprietary blend of chemicals that they inject in and they don't tell you. I think they should have to tell you what they're putting in.
Well, yeah, that's a little sketch, but as far as
the
actual action of fracking and the intent behind it and what it's doing.
I'm happy to get natural gas. I agree with you. And natural gas is helping us a lot. But I think that if people would say what was being put in, then we'd know what to test for in the water to see if the well water is getting polluted. And that's something they won't tell us. I also think that the statistics are a little skewed because you hear people say, oh, well, if this is done properly, but they never, you know, if there's a problem based on fracking, like some minor earth tremors in Ohio, they tend to say, oh, but that was done improperly. Well, why don't you have some very clear concrete guidelines? You can't drill within X distance of a fault line. That should exist.
And I think since it's relatively new, and as compared to other forms of natural gas, they will start developing those things.
I hope we do, yeah.
And they will. It's just like every time there's an oil spill, how new regulations get put in place. Each time there's a problem, regulations will get put in place. It's just a growth process of, but I'm pro for it in general.
I can't say that I'm against it, but I can say that I would rather try to find some common sense guidelines without waiting for the next disaster.
Well, yeah, but in a perfect world.
Which doesn't exist, and
Right.
we both agree. But, you know, that's why I think it's ridiculous for an industry making that much money to be opposed to people saying, let's put some regulation in, you know. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts. A lot of people are in favor of going with biofuels, and that's what the book's harping about. And I actually think it's a nice idea if we can afford it, you know. Some people say, how can we not afford it? So you would agree that this is just basic photosynthesis. So you take the CO2 and you take the sunlight and you take nutrients from the plants in, you're going to make the algae, right? You make algae, and the algae, of course, being a living organism, it's got some lipids, it's got some carbohydrates, it's got some proteins, it's got a lot of cell wall biomass. Now right here, their recommendation for cell wall biomass is, oh, well, we can burn it in a generator for heat or make organic fertilizer. Personally, I would rather see them run that, because remember, the cell wall, what is it made out of? It's made out of cellulose, right? You can do cellulosic ethanol. Right now, we do it by breaking it apart with harsh chemicals. I would rather see them go the enzyme route. Well, there are people right now who are isolating enzymes from those little vermin, those little trichonympha, that can break down cellulose and turn it back into the sugars that you could run through the process of making whiskey. That's basically what they're doing, they're making moonshine. You will, because there's less energy in there, you will need to burn a little more gas, a little more fuel. I'm going to use the word fuel than we've covered because you've got the blend. Okay. Because there's a little less energy in fuel that uses ethanol, yes, you will need to burn a little more fuel. But the amount of carbon dioxide that you release that is from the biofuels was air 6 months ago. So you're not adding anything to the air when you put it back. When you take carbon from a rock and you burn that and put it up there, you're taking things that were out of the atmosphere and putting it up. And that's what people are whining about. But this is the most fun chart in this whole biofuels thing, because it basically gets at the problem in a really good manner. It breaks everything down. See, corn uses a lot of water. Corn-based ethanol is where you're getting all of the ethanol in the fuel right now. Some people don't like that because, oh, it drives up food prices. Well, it might a little bit. It might, but a lot of fertilizer, a lot of pesticides, a lot of energy spent, and you only get a little bit of oil out. Oh, sorry, a little bit of alcohol out to use. Algae, it has some of the same problems. Like, you use a lot of energy, so you tend to have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, even more than corn, but you get a lot more energy out of it. So I think it's a good idea. The last thing you need to know for this, the summary. I put in red the things that matter the most. This you definitely need to know. Energy created or destroyed, converted from one form to another instead of being created or destroyed. Kinetic energy. Megan, what is the kinetic energy that I care about most in this chapter? The movement of light, photons of light. The whole thing in this chapter is about taking the kinetic energy of light and we're turning it into the potential energy of sugar molecules. Take the ATP and you make sugars. That's what the whole process is. I want you to know that photosynthesis is capturing light energy. I want you to know that that light energy is kinetic. I want you to know that that's converting it into potential energy. That's chemical energy. Good? I want you to know that most photosynthetic organisms are autotrophs. Okay? Most animals can't photosynthesize. We call them heterotrophs. Obviously, there are one or two exceptions because biology is full of weird. That's okay. I've been bitten. Ow, he has teeth. Ow, ow, ow.